Thank you, Marcus. Thank you for coming on the podcast, man. How you doing?
I'm wonderful. Thank you for having me.
Yes, thank you. And thank you for bringing all of these gifts here. We have all sorts of herbs that we're going to partake in on this podcast. And for the audience to find out more about you, your Instagram handle name is Medicated Marcus. And what does that medicated mean?
It means I'm medicated. I like to stay nice and medicated, as they would call it nowadays. Others would call it high. Mm-hmm. You know, I like to get medicated on cannabis and keep it nice and mellow.
Oh, definitely. So what? Well, I guess we have a few different origin questions, but let's start with just in general. When was the first time you smoked weed?
Definitely 16 going on 17.
Okay.
My brother was a big influence to me with that. He
corrupted you.
He did. I played a lot of soccer, so I never really had the time to, think about anything other than soccer. So it came to a point to where he was like, "Hey man, your soccer season's over with, right?" And I was like, "Yeah." He's like, "Well, how about you come with me and see what that getting high is about?" And I was like, I don't think so. And he conned me into it on Christmas Eve.
What?
Yeah, so we went to his apartment from a family party, and then he packed a couple of bowls, and I didn't know how many a couple of bowls would do my first time, and I was just like, it's not the best. I don't really know what I'm looking for. And then one moment came over where I was like, holy shit, this is crazy. My head feels like a balloon and my body feels like cement. I was sitting in a rocking chair just like going back and forth like, dude, this is wild. I've never felt like this before. Mm-hmm. And it was an out-of-body experience for me.
Damn. So your first one was like, it was no joke.
No.
You got high as fuck.
Yeah, and it was on some good stuff too. So I didn't know what good weed and bad weed was until started smoking weed, and I was like, wow, there is some really bad weed.
Yes.
And definitely my first time was a privilege.
I bet.
But I didn't know what I was tasting either. I was like, this is weird. This tastes weird. I've never smoked anything. I never smoked cigarettes, so I didn't know how to inhale, and it was strange.
Yeah, it seems like for your first experience, you get kind of like the mixed. Like sometimes people get high and they get super high and it's crazy, and then other times people don't get high because they don't really know how to hit it. Yeah. They don't really inhale it right. They're not holding it in. It's not that weed can't get you high the first time. It totally always can. Always. You just have to hit it properly.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And a lot of people do that fake hit where it's like they take a hit and they hold it in their mouth, but then they breathe in through their nose and don't like French it, so it goes nowhere.
Exactly. It's just sitting in your mouth, which is not going to get you the same high.
It will give you a little sensation, bit. But yeah, it's not going to do its job.
No, not the same as going down into the lungs.
No.
Okay, so you had your first experience around 16, 17. When would you say you started becoming more of like a regular smoker?
It didn't take long. Once I had a taste. Yeah, it was once I had my first good, couple of friends that were getting good pot also. I was like, this is cool. I didn't really buy too much just because my friends were always just like, hey, let's smoke a blunt or let's do this, let's go on a cruise. So for me, it was kind of just like I found out how to end up smoking weed and then still play soccer. And then so my senior year, once that soccer season was over, I was just nonstop blazing every day. And I never went to school high other than one time, and we were going on a field trip, and me and this dude Omar ended up smoking in his car, and then went in school, and we like ran through all the classrooms like, oh my god, dude, this is crazy. And then we got on it was for our art class, so we got on the bus, and our art teacher was our friend's mom, so like we knew her pretty well, and we just got in the back of the bus, and we were like, holy shit, dude. We got to Chicago, and we were going to the art museum, and we just ditched. Me and my friend Omar just ditched. We ended up hanging out with my dad, my brother. My dad worked downtown, so it was just like it was an awesome day. It was like a Ferris Bueller type of situation.
No, that's awesome, man. Yeah, I'm not gonna lie. I definitely went to school high several times, but I didn't like it. It wasn't like something I did frequently. But there would be some times where like we'd leave for a period. My friend and I, who he's actually been on the podcast, Brad, we would we would like leave at let's say third period or something. Maybe we had economics together or whatever, and then we would go home to my place because both my parents would be at work. So like we would just go back and hang out at my place. We would smoke a little bit, and sometimes we'd go back to school, and sometimes we would just be like, nah, fuck the rest of the day.
Right. I don't know how I would go back to school. I'd be like, there's a lot of people that aren't high right now, and it when you first start smoking weed, that whole like paranoia thing is so real,
dude. Even after you've been smoking for a while, that still can exist from people. Yeah, and you think everyone knows.
Yeah, you have to like mind fuck yourself to be like, who fucking cares? Mm-hmm. You know, I don't care if I'm high anymore, nor do if anybody else does. They've got
most people don't care.
Yeah, they got a waste of time if they're gonna be like, oh, can you not smell so loud? It's like, no.
This is as loud as I smell. Yeah. Dude, people will come into my work all the time and just reek, but not always reek of good weed, like reek of like shitty weed. And
yeah.
I'm like, bro, you're gonna come in here and you're gonna stink up the place, and it's not even gonna be good weed.
That Reggie.
Yeah, come on, man. At least get some high quality shit. I don't know. But no, so that's very interesting because I almost expected you to be both younger and to have gotten into it sooner. But you were like a serious, like soccer were you trying to play in college? Or?
I did play in college.
Oh, fucking there you go.
I only went to this Olivet Nazarene. You know, I played a year over there, and I was like, yeah, I can't deal with this school. This is it's a little much. It's very churchy. It's very like in your business. Like, what are you doing? You're not doing it for God. Well, you know, you need to start doing it for God. And I was like, holy shit, dude, I'm just trying to play soccer.
Yeah, you're like, this isn't worth what I signed up for.
Yeah. So it was, you know, I met a lot of cool people, especially the people that were athletes and stuff like that. So I had a lot of good friends that smoked weed and stuff like that and that lived off campus. And I met maybe like 5 or 6 dudes that we would blaze every day. Damn. Every single day after practice, go to practice.
Hey, you were doing it for God, bro.
Yeah, exactly. You know, it's his plan. So,
it was his plan, dude. He designed it.
Mm-hmm. We were just supporting it.
That's hilarious, man. So when did you realize that you're like, all right, as much as I love playing soccer, it's not worth the experience at this school?
Sophomore year. Like as soon as it was like the season was over, school was over, I called my parents. I was like, yeah, you know, as cool as it is that I got a scholarship for this, like I can't fulfill this type of situation. You know, this school and school itself is just not for me. You know, soccer, awesome, but, you know, just not my style of things.
So what was your plan then once you were like, all right, fuck school, it's not on my path. You know, it's cool for other people, but it's not cool for me. What was then kind of like your next game plan of where you wanted to go?
So after that school, I ended up going to Purdue Ivy Tech area for a little bit, West Lafayette. Mm-hmm. And I tried to get into Purdue, ended up going to Ivy Tech, and I met a bunch of people through there. And, you know, my friends went to Purdue, and a lot of friends in the area went to Ivy Tech also. So we ended up just really getting close to where we ended up like hatching up plans to who's going to get the weed, who's going to end up, you know, like putting down money. And we ended up getting enough product to where we were always happy with, you know, being able to get together and smoke with, you know, like 15, 20 blunts a day.
Damn.
Yeah. So
that's a fucking fuck ton of weed. For people who don't know, like it takes a lot of weed to make a blunt satisfying.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's not like you're just putting in a pinch. Like a joint, you can get away with like rolling just a little bit of weed just to get kind of the flavor.
Right. No,
but with a blunt, no, you're putting
but
in like
it was like 5 or 6 people that, you know, it would be like they're always in the same house, and our buddy would always be like, hey, if anybody comes over, we want to smoke them out. You know, show them a good time, show them where the party house is without alcohol. Mm-hmm. So it was mainly just clouds through this house. I mean, multiple times cops rolled through and they were like, "You guys can't be just clouding this house out every time on the weekend." And we're like,
my hands are tied.
It's better than drinking and driving, sir. And they're like, you're right. You're right about that.
We can't even argue with that.
So, and that's Indiana. So
yeah, Indiana. That's not exactly the most liberal area.
No. There are a lot of rednecks.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Well, there's a phrase in Florida, and it's the more north you go, the more south it gets. I'd imagine it's like kind of similar where just Indiana has certain pockets that are just like ultra conservative.
Absolutely. And, you know, especially with the whole farmy type of country guys. A lot of those guys, either go to the army, military, cops, or, a lot of that sort of thing. So they look down on pot, very much so, being like, you guys should be more respectful, responsible. And that's how the countryside is, the farm side. They want you to wake up at 5 o'clock, start your chores and get that shit done. So
yeah, which the work ethic and whatnot, like I can admire that.
Right,
That's awesome. Like get up early, get your shit done, do what you got to do. But then there needs to be that caveat of like, but then at the end, if you want to smoke a blunt, you can smoke a blunt because you did your work.
Right.
Yeah.
Or even if you can do that shit and still fulfill, your duties. If you can smoke in the morning and go to work and still have a conscious thought to be able to do your shit, then have at it. I mean, it's no, if people could drink all day long and stuff like that, pour shots, drink beers throughout their day and shit like that, I don't understand why people look down on just smoking a doobie throughout your day to day.
Right. Well, and I would argue that you are more capable of pulling it off with weed than you are with alcohol. Like,
Absolutely.
man, if you're taking a shot in the beginning of the day, there's a good chance you're going to be not in a good spot by the end of the day.
Right.
Whereas like weed, you can be, maybe a little bit foggy, but a little bit more coherent and way less likely to harm yourself or get mad and like get in some sort of drunken fight or something like that.
A lot of that.
Mm-hmm.
So
it's a pacifist drug.
Yeah.
It really is. Like,
right.
I've never smoked and then been like, I want to fight somebody.
No. Unless I was listening to that type of music or like watching like Never Back Down or some shit where I was like,
Never Back Down, dude.
That would be cool if I could do a backflip and kick a dude in the head. What?
Yeah, but you're thinking more about how cool the movement is than you are about kicking the dude in the head. You're more about like, but the acrobatics of that is so dope.
Right. You're right.
Yeah, it's a totally different frame of mind. No, so that's awesome, man. And then you actually got into the weed industry. So tell me a little bit about your introduction to the weed industry in general, and then we can spark up one of these things.
Totally. So I mentioned that group of friends that I ended up, meeting really, really closely in Purdue, Lafayette area. Mm-hmm. And one of our buddies, Drew, ended up moving to California after spending 3 years at Purdue. Mm-hmm. And he got a business degree and stuff like that. So he took off, and we were all like, "Yo, that's awesome," And he would contact us here and there, being like, "Yo, we got these harvests coming on. California's rules are this," and he had the accessibility to whatever he wanted because California was kind of like still on the chains of like legalization. So he was before the legalization. So it was like, yo, man, you're really paving the way. Like, you're living the dream. What can I do to do that? And he's like, honestly, you just got to like find the right type of people, connect with them and see where it takes you, because there's no like resume builder that you can be like, I grew this or I did that, So he was kind of my go-to person when it was like, hey, can I come visit you and you tell me what's going on? Like, I want to learn as much as I could from you. Mm-hmm. So he moved out there, and when he was out there, he ended up helping us out with a friend that had some seeds. So he was like, yo, just hit that guy up. We got some seeds, and we started growing. My buddy ended up growing a really shitty batch, and it was like really spacey, stuff like that. And he's like, it's too much time, too much money. I don't want to, put my house on the hot spot. Because, like, everybody thinks when you grow, it's like your speedometer thing or your energy bill just like just spirals out of control. It
really doesn't.
It's kind of like the same as like a PS2. Mm-hmm. Like if you leave a PS2 on all night, that's about the same energy as one of those lights take.
Sure.
So he gave me all of his equipment and was like, dude, I'm done with it. You can have it all. And I was like,
he just gave it to you?
Yeah,
that's
he was
awesome.
one of my buddies. So
yeah, that's awesome. Well, that's an easy startup then.
I took it all and I was like, all right, well, I'm going to look at my apartment building and see, what I can manipulate. Mm-hmm. And I lived on the bottom floor, so I just cleared out my closet, ended up just starting what I could. And I had a couple of plants, probably like 5-6 plants, and they were really small. Mm-hmm. And they ended up probably giving me like a fucking eighth each.
Okay.
So it's really depressing. Like you go through
pretty
like
low yield.
3.5 months of doing all this shit. And I wasn't learning anything. I was just doing it. Mm-hmm. So after I ended up, going through the process for a while, I was like, okay, man, what the fuck? You know, it's like, how do these people have bags and bags of fucking weed? Are they growing like thousands of plants? And obviously, yes, but I wanted something closet style. So I ended up just YouTubing a bunch of closet grows and was like, holy shit, dude, these dudes are doing it. You know, what's my difference? And I just kept flipping the lights too fast. Like I was just like water for a couple of weeks, and then I changed the light spectrum to like make it fall harvest. And man, they were just so tiny. They were just like solo cup size.
You weren't really giving it a chance to kind of mature and grow. You were trying to speed because you wanted to bud. You're like, I want to speed through the process.
I didn't know shit. So I was just like, oh man, what the fuck? So
just growing a plant, man.
Right. So I had 6 seeds left. So I was like, all right, cool. I'm gonna try it again. And I got 4 to sprout, and I was like, cool. And then I ended up doing my research the whole time, and I watched all these grow journals and pretty much watched all these people success, fails, different lighting, really just using CFL light bulbs versus 400 watt lights, and going through like 1,000 watt lights and seeing the complete difference. And then it ended up getting better, and I ended up yielding like 3 ounces from each plant. So I was like, awesome, this is cool. And we just had a nice little head stash and just kept smoking on that. And from there, it just got better and better. And when I visited my buddy Drew in California, it was like, dude, this is some of the best closet weed I've ever seen. And he's been in California for like 2 years at that point. So
he's seen a lot. It's not like he's seen nothing. Yeah.
Right. But most of that stuff was outdoor weed that he was working with on a farm so far. So outdoor weed grows completely different than indoor weed.
Does it grow better, or are there arguments to be made for both? Or
Totally. So the arguments are elements in the outside. So it's like when you grow outdoor, you got bugs, you got dust, you got too much sun, you got rain, snow, temperature changes.
More variability.
Right. To where indoor, you can pretty much manipulate perfect conditions every day, every time. I mean, you got to worry about bugs and stuff like that, but that's, how cleanly your grow is. So I'd say indoor is a lot cleaner and easier to do, but you can totally get some high quality cannabis from outdoor grows.
Yeah, okay.
Especially greenhouse, or even like just different types, I guess.
Yeah, I would think greenhouse would probably be the best.
Well,
right?
You can manipulate both in a greenhouse, which is kind of cool. They have the glass greenhouses now, so it's like you can end up putting lights in there, and then they have like these black pullover canopies that end up creating more darkness if the light's staying out too long. They can end up manipulating the dark cycle, so it's like, they can do so much with a greenhouse, the same as like an indoor grow. So
okay, and then how much time of like light versus darkness do you need with the plant? Like, are there cycles that it goes through? And like, okay,
there's there's a vegetative stage, and then there's a flowering stage. So if you're doing an indoor grow, it'll usually start off with like 18 hours of sunlight and a veg, and then once you flip it over to 12 and 12, that's going to be your flowering cycle, kind of like how the sun goes when it goes to like autumn.
Okay.
So the sun just starts getting lower and lower, earlier. So then it ends up creating darkness faster, and then you end up.
Sure. So then it's changing the general balance of when the light would be coming, so that it knows kind of like seasonally, oh, this is about my time.
Absolutely.
Which makes sense, because it's like you'd wonder, like, other than obviously the climate itself changing, like how else do these plants know when the seasons are shifting?
Yeah.
But that makes sense. It's the sun. Yeah. I mean, and that's how we knew too. It was the sun and the stars. So we used to use the stars as like our pinpoints of like, oh shit, we got to get our harvest done now, like meaning just like crops.
Right.
And we got to get this done now because we're almost about to be in winter.
Yeah. And I mean, it's so cool just because, you got plants that are indica based, and they're more adapted to colder weather. So it's like you got more of your purples and stuff like that pretty much originated from mountains and shit like that. And then you got your more sativas that have the really tall, stretchy, kind of like Jamaican type bushes and shit like that. So I mean, it's just cool to see the different plants and how you can all grow the same thing in the same room,
What are your preferences on sativa versus indica?
I don't know. I generally go for a lot of sativas just because I think they got a little bit more flavor. Especially more like fruity and just like delicious pine and shit like that. So
sure.
There's a lot of indicas that do stand up with the OG, just like the GMO. It smells really fucking like danky, and it'll stink up your whole house. But I don't know. Generally, I think that like sativas just have like Tangy. Tangy's a fucking strain that I never get sick of.
Yeah.
Every time I crack that thing up, I'm like, holy shit.
I like the smell of this.
So fruity. Delicious.
I like the fruit.
Yes.
It's so good.
It's delicious.
Yes. We got to smoke.
Yeah, for sure.
Hell yeah. But yeah, so for people who don't know the difference between sativa and indica, give the audience a little bit of like, well, what is effects wise the difference, and then also more like plant wise, what's the difference?
So in my opinion, I just think that sativas grow a little bit faster, and it could be different though, because you can have a sativa pretty much mature a lot quicker depending on where it's placed in the lighting, in a room, outside, and then you can also have the same achievement with indica, and depending on how fast you can manipulate it to where you can grow it to this big, and then you flip it over to flower, and then you can end up growing it 4 times the size and flip it over to flower, and that's all how long you put it in the veg stage. So it's, if you end up having one plant and you end up vegging it for 15 weeks and you try to get it as big as possible, that's pretty much achieving as much like root base as you're going to give it. So it's like pretty much the bigger the plant, the more you can yield, but also sometimes the longer you go, the less bud you can get from it, because the size of it will be achieving less than if it was more directed to one single bud.
Gotcha. So like, because you're spreading it over several branches,
right,
you might lose a little bit of potency in it as well.
Yeah, just because like, well, bud, they'll grow differently.
They'll grow differently. Right. Okay. So like smaller then at that point?
Yeah.
On each individual branch, because there's more of them. But if there was less branches, then it can allocate the resources differently in terms of energy, and put more into each individual bud. Okay. Right. That's interesting. I didn't know that.
And I mean, you could even have like giant ass colas coming from one bud, and then if you grew it separate or differently and you topped it to where topping is pretty much taking the top shoot and branching it out to other shoots. Okay. So if you chop the head off of it, it's going to pretty much just like create more heads throughout its body. And then the giant cola that it once was building is going to be spread out through the whole area then.
Damn. Okay.
Yes. But sometimes, it's a benefit, and it can also be a not benefit, just because density can create a factor, and sometimes you really want to like it, the longer you stretch it, it can lose its like vigor to actually like keep producing more and more and more. Yeah. Sometimes it's just like, fuck, man, I'm tired. I don't have enough root base. I don't have enough nutrients. So you really got to follow through with like how big your soil base is and how big your pot is and what you're growing with. All that shit factors into the type of product you're going to get.
And there's a lot of variables there. Like, it depends on the space that you're in too, of like, well, how big do I want this to be if I'm in my tiny apartment? You know, probably not that big then.
And they usually do it by like light square footage. So it's like they usually have like a 400 watt light would be like 4x4. Okay. You don't want to overdo it to where you got 20 plants in a 4x4 and no light is getting those 15 plants.
Yeah, exactly. You got to make sure that they're each getting equally fed.
Right.
I mean, that's what, people got to remember, is that it's a life form, a plant. It's not talking to you, but it certainly has its needs, and it's an organism, and it's going to have its growing requirements. And it's so cool to see that now that it is legal in several states, is that we're at the point where we are kind of able to really learn about these phases and the best way to grow it, and how can we get the best ratio of THC to CBD and all that. It's crazy.
We are, but technically we aren't, because if it was federally legal, then we would be doing so much research to where we can actually probably like figure out cancer research and shit like that. But since it is federally illegal, nobody can really study it without the grants of like a college or some shit like that. So, there are some colleges that are researching it. There are some countries and states that are researching it, but not to the full fact of like really getting to the nitty gritty and finding out the beneficial values further.
Yeah, because when you have limitations on studying, and I've talked about this with Joey with like psychedelics and MAPS,
right?
And just in general on how when you're not able to even test the shit to figure out its safety or to figure out the best methods or whatnot, then you're basically just kind of taking shots in the dark with the few people who do have the permission to do it.
Right.
And it's like then they have to prioritize things of like, well, we only have one experiment that we're allowed to do this year or something. Let's pick the one that's going to hit the most things. But then there might be some really specific shit that we just need a lot of people testing in a lot of different ways in order to discover that thing.
Right.
Who knows how many hidden properties of this plant there are that we just haven't really had a chance to try to learn it.
Right. And I mean, also just like it's so biased too. It's like, why? There's nothing beneficial about cannabis. We already know that. It just creates a bunch of couch potatoes.
That's why we have opioids.
Yeah. Opioids. Yum. 5 a day.
Right.
I mean, it's messed up what doctors will prescribe just to get you out of their face.
Well, and even just like okay, I have wisdom teeth surgery. Do I need a pill bottle of like 20 of these? No.
Maybe 5.
Yeah. And I didn't. So I took one on the day that I had the surgery, like post waking up from the anesthesia. I threw up everything, and then I was like, okay, not anymore. And I didn't have a single other one after that.
Same exact thing.
And I just did Advil, and that was it.
Same thing.
Yeah. And I wanted to smoke, but I couldn't because of the nature of the surgery, right? Yeah.
I said, fuck you guys.
Yeah, I was a little nervous about the smoking part. I think I got to a point where I vaporized on like the last the 4th or 5th day from the surgery. But yeah, edibles would have been the way to go. But really, honestly, only like an edible, like a pill or something. Nothing I had to chew.
Right. Which they do have capsules now. So it's, I mean, they even
except I was in Florida, so didn't have that option.
Florida they do now, though. I've actually tried some Florida THC capsules that are rocking.
Are those, but I'm pretty sure Florida, and maybe they've changed since I've left Florida, but it was very specific what it was legal for. It was like
I don't
really
think they can have
shit.
any flower.
I don't think they can have flower either.
No.
Yeah.
So I think it's just it's these Pax pods and it's these capsules.
Got it.
And I've seen both of them, and I mean the capsules are solid just because it's kind of like a tincture inside a capsule. So they're kind of like getting around it a little bit. They're like, oh well, they're just capsules, but technically it is a tincture, and you can taste the like glycerin when. I choked on one, like it got stuck in my throat because I took it with coffee. Terrible idea.
No, not a good idea.
And it was like one of them gel capsules, and it got stuck in my throat, and I was like, shit.
You literally have to eat something. Like what I'll do is I'll go find something to eat to then push it down so that it could just get
I just
it out
drank
of my throat.
more coffee. I was like, hopefully this shit melts it like out of my throat, and it did.
It did?
Yeah.
Yeah. It ended up working out.
Yes, it did.
Edibles. Let's talk about that for a second.
Okay.
Edibles are so different than smoking it. Really, every way is different. Smoking it is different than vaping it, which is different than, and like even different ways of smoking it. Smoking a joint is different than a blunt, which is different than smoking out of a bong, which is different than a bubbler or a bowl. They all give you a different high.
Yeah.
Why is that? What is the property
Our brains, man. I think it's so like when I've heard some research done on pretty much like how our brain takes in cannabis, and I'm pretty sure like the best way possible is like a glass pipe, just because it's like, if you use a glass pipe and some fucking hemp wick, that's like easy peasy because you're not burning any glass. Glass doesn't like break down. And hemp wick is no butane or gases. So it's like you're really getting the cleanest of the clean.
Yeah.
This, we're still smoking paper. Bongs, bongs are good, but they say that it's like it's not the highest high because the water filters the actual smoke. Same with a bubbler. Vaporizers, they say are awesome, especially for like the actual like high itself, vaporizing the THC. But in the same sense, not having it be a thick smoke doesn't get you as high because it's not really suffocating your brain as much. So it's like, for me, hey, I want to feel, like it's completely ripping my brain apart, just like melt it out, just like, oh, that hit was awesome, and I'm completely relaxed. Yeah. Versus, sometimes vaporizers are so see-through where I'm like, I I keep going back to, man, I wish I was higher. I wish I was higher. You know, I wish I had some better weed to put in here or something, you know. And it's technically not the weed. It's just how much you're smoking of it and how you're smoking it.
It's true. It's like there is a time factor too, in a sense similar to like shots of alcohol, that if you're smoking it a lot or if you're hitting a lot in a short period of time, you will get higher than if you hit that same duration over like the course of like an hour.
Right.
You know, and it really is a big difference. So there's a huge fall off. And then once you've built up a tolerance for the day, like until you go to sleep again, you know, your tolerance won't be reset. Like you have to work harder to get to the same level.
To rest your brain.
Yeah, you do. And like that's where, you know, I'd argue that you don't really want to be high all the time. You got to have a baseline.
Yeah. Because, I mean, at one point, when are you high and when are you not high? You know, knowing that in its own, you know, you won't appreciate getting high if you are never not high. I mean, you know, it sounds awesome, but it's like you want to end up remembering taking that hit of that joint and being like, holy shit, that was awesome.
Yep.
Versus just smoking and smoking and smoking and smoking, and then you wake up the next day and you're like, all right, well, I got a taste of ass in my mouth, so I'll keep smoking. Mm-hmm. You know, I like that time where I go to work and then it all just goes away. And then you get out of work and you're like, holy shit, I cannot wait to take a fat dab when I get home.
Yep. And then you're like, all right, back up.
It fucks me up. Every time I'm like, my lungs are virgin baby lungs right now, so take it easy. And I'm like, too fat a dab? Okay. I'm done.
Dude, and on your Instagram, you hit some huge rips. I'm like, holy shit, man. What is that like?
Well, sometimes it's funny just because there's been times to where I've definitely taken like 2 or 3 like videos to try to get the better video.
Yeah.
So sometimes it's like taking 3 slabs versus just recording anything and being like, fuck it, I really don't care. Mm-hmm. So there's times where I've been like dying, coughing, drooling all over the place, like, holy fuck, that was way too hot, you know, because when you take a hot dab, it evaporates a lot faster. So if you take a nice low temp, it pretty much like sits in like a boiling pot and it kind of just rotates and lightly simmers the smoke versus like just giving you a rush of fucking vapor right away.
Yeah. So what is the optimal temperature for a dab?
I would say
for
like
the most pleasurable experience, like balance of pleasure versus intensity.
So this banger takes like 50 seconds to decrease heat to where it's like perfect temperature and you get complete flavors. Like I don't know if you've done like the difference of a titanium nail versus like a banger.
Dude, I don't know anything on dabs.
Okay.
Like
so,
I've done them, but I couldn't tell you anything about them. I know vaporizers really well.
So like with dabs, it's totally best to have glass banger, which is this little piece right here. Mm-hmm. And
so for those who are just listening to it, it's a piece that kind of looks almost like a cup of beer.
Yeah,
It really like does. It looks like a little cup of beer, and you heat this thing up with a blowtorch.
Correct.
And you get it to the temperature you want. How do you know when it's hot enough?
So with this glass, you see I left it a little bit. There's a little like char inside there.
Sure.
A little tiny char.
There's like a little bit just right in the center.
Yeah, just like it looks like a little char on glass. And technically a good way to know when your banger is ready to go is when the old dab is completely burned out and you got a nice clean, like even if you got to heat it for like 2 minutes, clean that shit up and get it back to a nice clean banger, and then wait the time and take the dab, because if you end up like taking a dab with that shit in there, it might even contaminate my dab and give it like a burnt taste or some shit like that. And sometimes I've felt like if I leave it in there and I just give it like a 10-second heat just to get enough heat to take a dab off of it, sometimes I feel like it steals my dab. Like it's like it gets into the char.
And it ruins it.
Yeah, and it's like, oh, what the fuck? Where'd it go?
So basically, you have to burn that enough, so long enough so that little bit that you left over is your indication that okay, I've heated it up enough.
Right, and if you don't have anything left in your banger, like if you Q-tipped it to where it's like a nice clean, nice bucket again, then I would say like 45 to 50 seconds is a good heat.
Okay, so
maybe
just
even a minute.
under. I was gonna say just under a minute, or is a minute cool as well?
Yeah, a minute's cool if you got to do it. Like I said, you definitely want to burn it out to where it's clean again, so you can end up having the cleanest dab. After it gets to a certain low temperature, you'll notice the perfect time. After you dab enough, it's kind of like a wrist technique. Mm-hmm. Your wrist is pretty easy flesh, so you can feel heat pretty well over it. So you just take your wrist and you put it over the banger.
Safely, of course.
Right. And you obviously don't
caution.
touch it.
Yeah, don't touch it. It's just to have a sense of the heat that's coming off of it.
It's almost like, imagine, touching the stove without, you can't see if the stove's on, and, you're not just going to put your hand on it. You're going to put your hand over it.
You're going to put your hand over it to feel it, for sure.
Okay, cool. That's hot, or it's not hot. And, after you dab for a while, you definitely pick up a good sense of when your dab is ready. Sometimes people pick up a timer. Sometimes people have the sand timers, the little shh, So that's definitely good to have. Yeah, it's good to have when you're starting off, because, burning your dab and just watching it evaporate or just coughing your balls off is two ways to find out that it was too hot.
Well, and you even, your phone has a timer, so, you can easily time that precisely.
There's people that will time how long they heat up, time how long it sits, and then just time how long they can keep their dab going for. So, just getting specifics.
There's an art to it.
There is, for sure.
Yeah, I dude, dabs are too much for me sometimes. I just get too high from dabs, to the point where I'm like, this isn't fun. I mean, but I guess it depends on the type of dabs you're doing.
Yeah.
Right. And I'm sure there's different effects.
Right, and if you're dabbing correctly too, because if you're dabbing off a titanium nail, that's going to be a lot of high heat going straight to your throat, going to your chest. It's evaporating fast. So when you do titanium nails, and that was 3-4 years ago when everybody was just getting into dabbing and shit, those definitely hurt. Because that's how it was. It's first we started off with a glass nail, and then it had the little dome, and that's what we were dabbing off of when we first started getting this poop soup, which was tar looking.
Poop soup.
It was garbage.
Yeah.
But it was sent from our friend in California, and that's what he was seeing. So we were like, cool, man, send it up. First time I saw it, I was like, that's not weed, man. I'm not doing anything with that.
Yeah.
My friend's like, dude, you just torch this thing, and then you put this thing on top, and you just dab this shit on it. And I was like, yeah, dude, no. You got any weed, though? And he's like, dude, I only got a half ounce and just this stuff. He said it's better. And I was like, dude, I really don't want to do that. Can we just pack a bowl? He's like, dude, you're going to try it. You're going to try it. We're all trying it. So we all sat down and we took a dab on this fucking little rig he bought and heated up this glass nail. We put the dome on it, and we all and you just watch the smoke pretty much ripple up and just get sucked down in the little hole through the rig, and then you just blow out this cloud, and you're like...
and you can't even breathe. Right. Yeah, that's how it was for me.
Yeah.
I did not like it.
So if we take a dab later, I'll show you the correct dab, and we don't have to do it now. We can do it later before I roll out. So if you do freak out, you can't blame me.
I'm like, I don't know if I have the stamina, but we'll see.
Yeah. I mean, so this is a nice smelling container of dabs.
So what goes into the process of making a dab? What exactly is it? Because I feel like I don't fully understand.
So it would pretty much be a very scientific thing if you saw it. It would look like a fucking laboratory setup, and it should be very concentrated in the setup, just because it's there were people that were starting off making dabs in their garage using butane, which is cans like this. Mm-hmm. So they would be buying a 50 pack of this shit, and they were stuffing 4 ounces into a glass vial, and then they were pushing all the liquid through it, and then it would pretty much wash all the trichomes off the bud.
What are trichomes?
Trichomes are the little crystals all over the plant. So it's when you get a product of the plant, which is the bud, they produce a bunch of crystals which kind of look like sand. It's the things that are they're very, very tiny on there.
Mm-hmm.
And
it's what gives it kind of a fuzzy look.
Right, exactly, or a sugary look.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, sugary,
and
definitely.
that is the ingredient to get you high. THC is the actual thing that burns and gets you high. It starts out THCA, and when you put it through a flame or heat and burn it, it turns to THC, which gets you high.
Gets you super high.
Yeah.
Damn, dude, that joint. That was a big joint.
It was a good one.
That was a good one. Got pretty smoky in here.
Mm-hmm. It's still fading around over there.
It's still kind of just chilling. So I guess like with weed for me, the science of it is so cool, and the way that the ways that you consume it change things. How would you compare edibles to smoking it or vaporizing it?
Okay, edibles. So edibles, you obviously eating it and it's dissolving in your fat. So it really depends on how the edibles are made. Like edibles could be a tincture even, or even a drink. They have syrups and stuff like that that are considered edibles, you know. Mm-hmm. So when you eat anything or ingest anything, drinks-wise, definitely activate a lot quicker because it's a liquid. So you can absorb water and liquids and juices and shit a lot quicker, and then you start peeing, you know. So It definitely goes through your body a lot quicker than a food takes to digest. So edibles are definitely really cool, especially if you're like going on a flight. You want to take like a 50 milligram edible and knock out, you know, kind of just wake up wherever the fuck you're at and be like, whoa, that's awesome. Or if you really want to chill out, like I took an edible before a tattoo one time, and it was really nice because I didn't feel it for like 3/4 of the way, and then it wore off, and I was like, holy shit, I wish I had another one of those.
Yeah.
But it goes differently. So like if you have a high tolerance, it's definitely going to take a little bit more edibles to kind of get you high. So if you're like a heavy smoker, sometimes you'll need the actual 100 milligram mark versus like the 10 milligram mark, which is like the beginners.
Mm-hmm. 10 milligrams is like an average edible.
Yeah,
right,
yeah.
That you'll find.
And even like starting off, 10 milligrams can be high for some people. Like I've working at the dispensary, you know, there were a lot of times where we had to educate people so intensely, being like, listen, we don't want you to end up in the hospital. We want you to have a good time medicating. We want you to come back and be like, yo, I had a great time. Like, this is what I did. Like, even sitting on the couch. If you tell us you had a great time sitting on the couch, success. Mm-hmm. You know, the last thing we want to hear is you went to the hospital and you thought you were having a heart attack or some shit like that. So, edibles are definitely tough with beginners, starting off like less than 10 milligrams and then build up, you know, throughout the week. Don't start off and be like, oh, well, 10 milligrams didn't work, 20, 30, 40, and then, you know, you're like, well, then I fell asleep. Well, then it's because you took too many. Mm-hmm. So you have to definitely kind of have just like a log build up, see how you feel, you know, see your emotions, see, you know, your energy levels too. Definitely change up different edibles, the kinds you eat, gummies, chocolates, you know, all that shit can definitely give you a different high depending on how you eat it.
Yeah, I was going to say, like, what's the absorption rate for gummies versus, like, canna butter-based things?
So, canna butter-based, I think, would be, like, an hour, just because it is really fatty. So, you know, the breakdown in your body is going to be a little bit longer. Gummies are usually, you know, like 30 minutes just because it is usually glycerin or gelatin, which is pretty dissolvable. You know, you could hold them in your hand and they'll start breaking down on you. So, chocolates, I would say about 30, 45 minutes also. And everybody is different. So, you know, if you're a bigger person, you know, probably going to take a little bit longer for your body to start breaking it down. If you're a smaller person who's pretty active gym-wise, or, you know, if you take an edible and go to the gym and you start working out, you're going to feel it within maybe like 15 minutes because you're going to start sweating and it's going to start breaking down faster. So it really just depends on everybody and how much you eat, what you eat. Making edibles is kind of a funny thing just because, you know, unless you're really going through the process of taking a starting plant, putting it through, you know, a process and keep your calculations correct, where you're taking a 24% THC and then you're breaking it down with butter and you're using an ounce and then you're using it for 12 hours in this Seuss maker, you know, so breaking that down is the only way you're going to get efficient on your own homemade edibles and shit like that. But as far as dispensary shit, those things are all calculated in dosages of like distillates and shit like that in cannabis, in concentrates. So it's like when they're making gummies in cultivation centers, they're usually using concentrates just because it's easier to figure out the dosage versus using can butter, because can butter could evaporate in this corner and then be really heavy condensed in that corner.
Damn, that just blew my mind.
Yeah.
Bro. There's so much that goes into it.
So much.
And I feel like edibles are something that people need to take a lot of precaution with. Like,
yeah, for sure.
They can be way more. I mean, it's still easy to smoke too much too, but I feel like it's just way too easy to get too high from edibles. And edibles, to me, are very psychedelic.
Yeah.
I feel like they can be very similar and sometimes more like anxiety based than like mushrooms.
Right.
I don't know. I feel like almost mushrooms is more gentle than an edible at a high dose.
Depending on your situation. Like if you eat a bunch of edibles and then you go into a situation where, you know, there's a bunch of people or it's a clusterfuck and you're just like, holy shit, my body is just wanting to sit down.
Yes.
Yeah, then for sure. Like, you know, I went to a movie on mushrooms and, you know, handled the crowd perfectly, but the only thing was the person next to me, like 3 or 4 seats over, was a little teenage kid and this girl and then another teenage kid, and they kept pulling out their phone and talking the whole time. And while I was on mushrooms, I was just like, shit, I want to tell them to shut the fuck up so bad, but I can't. But then, you know, if I smoke a bunch, eat a bunch of edibles and went to the theater, it's like, I'll be like, yo, shut the fuck up, kids. Shut up. I will throw your phone across the fucking theater if you don't shut up. But on mushrooms, I was like, what if they're just like older people and I think they're kids? And I'm like, no older people would be that dick to just be sitting through a movie talking the whole time.
No, it's definitely teenagers.
Yeah. And then the lights went on at the end of the movie after I just contemplated it the whole time, just being like, yo, say shut up. Say shut up. Say shut up. And I never said it, and then the lights go on, and they were like 14, and I was like, oh my gosh, dude. Your movie was ruined by some 14-year-old kids. Yeah.
It's brutal when that happens.
Yeah. But I guess I've just grown to be, you know, I've grown to conquer that kind of like weirdness of edibles and smoking and that overwhelming feeling. You know, I'm kind of just used to it by now, to where it's like, I will say shut the fuck up if I'm on a bunch of edibles, you know, because I'll usually not care that much.
Yeah, you've let go of the part that like makes you like ultra self-conscious, because I do feel like weed can make you super self-conscious, where you're just like analyzing yourself, and it's a good thing that it makes you analyze yourself, but sometimes it can be in the moment like overwhelming. Yeah, and it's easy to get caught in that, and I feel like there's a lot of precautions you have to take with weed, honestly. Yeah,
and you know, that of dabs. Dabs are, you know, a whole different situation, just because, you know, they are 90%, you know, 60% to 90% concentrated THC. So, you know, that's an awesome type of thing. If you're like, oh, I just need a one and done, you know, they used to say a little dab will do you. So,
dude,
and it will.
One dab legit can be enough. Like, it can be too much.
Yeah, it could be like smoking a joint or a blunt in one dab,
one hit.
Right. But the process of making that is probably
there.
It's probably the most intense way to make this product. You know, growing is a long process, but anybody could do it. You know, you could just plant a seed outside, have the sun do its thing, and you got a plant, but taking care of it makes it better. Whereas concentrates, that's a tough one, just because you have so many elements: butane, propane, ethanol. Those are the 3 types of gases that a lot of people use. CO2 oil. Mm-hmm. and it's pretty much a really, really cold solvent that they blast through the flower. It removes all the little crystals, the trichomes, and then they all puddle down into a dish or a pan or a little reservoir. And then from there, that reservoir removes all the gases that they used to flush all the trichomes. And then from there, they end up purging it, which is kind of like a 3 or 4 hour process of just removing more gases and gassing and expanding it and dropping it down. So it turns into it starts at like a really liquid consistency because of all the solvent they used, and then it starts evaporating, starts turning into like that hashy gum, kind of like taffy consistency. And then once they purge it, they finally get their like stopping point to where they have to end up purging it enough to where there has to be almost like under 0.10 residual gases left in there, and that's less than a Bic lighter when you're lighting your flower.
Wow.
Yeah. So it's like ppm, parts per million. So it's like they say you take in like 15 to 30% ppm butane when you use a lighter, and you have to have your concentrates below 10.
Damn. So that's where I'm thinking the hemp wick is like the move when you're going to smoke.
Especially like a nice clean bowl. Hemp wick is like, you're going to get the best flavor. You're going to really taste what that flower, I mean, especially smoking good flower. Like smoking shitty flower, smoke it with a Bic lighter because it doesn't even matter. Get high, you use that butane, whatever. But when you got nice crystally flower that has a nice spongy kind of feel to it, to where it's going to bounce back and it's been cured correctly, and it has the moisture, the terpenes, and the crystals, it's all going to combine and give you this good full feeling effect and get you a lot higher than maybe like a 30% THC strain.
Yeah.
THC just isn't the only thing that gets you high. It's all a well-rounded effect. It's almost like a soup.
Totally. And you need the CBD too. The CBD helps calm some of the THC effects.
If you're ever too high, using CBD drops you right down. So, I mean, using CBD flower, smoking it, they've got ACDC or Charlotte's Web or, Painkiller, really high CBD strains that kind of zap the euphoria type high that THC can give you, which is super cool.
Yeah. What kind of state of mind does that put you in? For those maybe who don't want to get high but want to get the benefits of the plant.
Very focused and kind of sober. That's why, CBD is a funny one for me because, I was prescribed ADD medicine and shit like that. So, a lot of people were like, yo, you should try CBD. And I did. But the one thing is it brought my personality to where I was just like, I was too focused and I was too mellowed out. And I was just like, almost just like boring. I was just like, man, I really wish, I could look at the TV and be like, that was funny. But I was just like so zoned out that I was just like, oh man, I need to get high. And then I ended up smoking some awesome flower, and I was like, okay, yeah, CBD is not like heavy CBD is not for me.
Yeah.
I have to have a mix.
Everybody's different too, and like the different effects that CBD gives you versus THC. Some people might really benefit from the THC. Some people might really benefit from the CBD. It depends on your personality.
Right. And there is a thing called the entourage effect, which is pretty much just like the full spectrum. Having the terpenes, having the high THC, having a high CBD, having a nice CBN, which is more of like a sleeping, relaxing kind of cannabinoid and shit like that. Just having the full spectrum of a good grown flower is going to get you I mean, not only high, it's going to get you comfortable, to where it's giving you that security of good grown medicine. There's medicines that have like polluted products in them, just like pesticides and, shit like that will irritate the fuck out of your brain. You think it's the weed, but really it's just how it was grown. And that's huge. Illinois is very strict on what they use and how shit's grown.
Yeah, do you know some of the regulations on that, or?
I just know that they're allowed to use like predatory mites, which are like ladybugs, or like I guess they're just called predatory mites. I don't really know their name, but it's almost just like like a smaller bug that will attack like flies and larvas and shit like that do come in most like bags of soil and shit like that. So soil is like your first like problem around Illinois. It's just because a lot of these soils are shipped in from other states and shit like that, and you have to get it from somewhere.
And it might be contaminated with something.
Right. It's not just your regular soil right outside. You know, it usually has to be pH'd, depending on how they're growing. A lot of people do hydroponics. Hydroponics is just a looser soil base. Cocoa coral is, and like kind of like barkish type feeling soil.
Okay.
And it retains water really well, but it's not soil. You know, it lets the runoff run a lot faster. So a lot of people use cocoa coral when they're doing hydroponics. Hydroponics create like a faster, cleaner grow just because there's nothing that's sitting on the roots. Everything just runs straight through and straight down. And it can create a cleaner type of flower just because the water's always running on it. Whereas with growing soil, you're watering it, it's drying. You're watering it, it's drying. You're watering it, it's drying. So sometimes there could be nutrient buildup, and it can contaminate the whole taste of the flower just because, you know, people don't flush their flower, and it starts with the roots, and it's just all built up. So by the time you're done with a grow, you have to definitely wash it or flush it, and it's pretty much the last 2 weeks is just running water over it so it cleans out the roots. Because if the roots are taking up a bunch of bullshit, it's going to end up in your flower at the end.
Yeah, it makes sense because it is what it eats.
Right, exactly.
It's just transferring the energy. And
Absolutely.
So if it's taking it from, you know, an overly nutrient-rich place,
right,
and it's not going to be good for it.
It's going to be salty, and it's going to burn kind of like crispy and crackle and shit like that. So, you know, having people that grow their medicine correctly, you know, is you'll get a lot better medicine than if it was grown shitty and then tested at like, 32%. Wow, that's a lot of THC. It's like you're just going to get a head rush, and that's about it. You know, just one-sided type of high.
Yeah, and can you spot that immediately when you look at it?
Yeah, I mean, if you know different like growing techniques and cures and stuff like that, a curing is pretty much like when the plant is cut down. A curing usually takes like a week to a couple of months. It's just like a wine, you know. You're not going to squeeze a wine and then drink it that day and be like, wow, that was good. You know, a lot of the best wines are like, 50 years old. So with curing, you take the buds off the branches, you trim them, and then you put them into another jar. Those jars sit for like I said, a month. And in the first few weeks, you'll pop the tops off of those jars. You'll put them in contained jars, and then you'll pop the tops off of the jars, and slowly it removes the moisture from inside the bud. So not only are you not seeing it in the actual like trim process, you're slowly wicking the moisture out of the flower. So in that process, it ends up just giving the inside of the flower a chance to really dry out, the same as the outside was dried out. So when it transfers all the way through, you get a nice like spongy flower versus a really dry and crispy flower. So when you get that like nice spongy flower, it's going to have a lot more smell to it. It's going to have a lot more flavor. It's going to smoke a lot easier versus something that's going to be like sawdust and just light up.
What's the ideal time frame for that?
I would say like, so sometimes when I was growing, we would end up curing for like about a month was like the end of our flower. So we would get so eager, we would start smoking it after 2 weeks. And then, it would be a little bit wet by the time you're grinding it up. You're splitting a bud, and it's kind of like sticking together. It's really, really sticky. Your grinder gets super gummy. But by the end of that month, it was, perfect, just because the moisture finally had enough time. We opened the jar like every day. We would be digging into it, we'd be taking shit out. So by the end of by the end of a month, it was like we had maybe 2 jars left, and we were like, man, now it's perfect. But we already went through like 3/4 of it. So it was like, hey, I mean, you got to learn. You got to, it's almost like, how would we have known the perfect time if we didn't smoke it all the way through?
It's true. Because then you knew when it was the right moment. You're like, okay, next time we do this, we'll wait till then.
Right. I mean, what if we waited that whole month and then we tried it and it was just shitty? It was like, stale or something,
Yeah.
Then we would have been like, oh, damn it.
Yeah, then you learn nothing because you don't know when it went stale.
Right.
Yeah.
So it was cool. We learned a lot.
Hey, that's all you can ask for any sort. I mean, because really it's just a lesson. It's not even a failure. You still succeeded. You learned something new and you got to enjoy the herb.
I wasn't being graded, so it was.
Right?
I mean, it was all for head stash. Whatever we got, we shared. We got to smoke on. Whatever we didn't get, it wasn't a loss. It was just like, all right, next time.
Mm-hmm.
So it was, one of the coolest things I've definitely learned, because it gave me the starting point to just keep learning from that spot. Seeing the failure at his house, it was like complete dud, and then afterwards it was like, okay, I kind of had a dud too. What did I do wrong? I flipped it too early. So shit never had a chance to fully mature, and then I got better and better and better, and then I moved to Chicago, so I had to stop. But yeah, I'm around a bunch of plants every day, so it's not a big deal.
Hell yeah. In what capacity are you doing it now?
So at the facility, I'm just a trimmer, and I just get to see every type of flower that comes through our room, every type of flower that goes into packaging or extracts or edibles and shit like that. It all starts from us and has to be processed. So our last harvest, we probably did like 300 plants, and it varies all the time because rooms are different and all cultivation centers are different sizes. But it could be different size plants too. Just like I said, sometimes it comes to them having to push flowers or having to like get a flower to mature correctly. You got to almost like test it out to see, was this a good time to flip the lights, or was this a good time? So being around a big facility is cool because you get to see so many different types of that same strain or genetics. So it's like you can have one that was in row B and it looks completely different than row C, just because it had different spectrum of light, a different angle, it was next to a different guy. It all depends. So being able to see that whole spectrum of shit, even all over line, all online, there's different like cannabis tours, cultivation tours, and you're like, can you imagine working for a facility with like 60,000 plants, or like just acres on acres of land, and every day you gotta almost like just tend to those. That's a dream come true for me. I would love to just walk through aisles and aisles and be like, yep, looks good, looks amazing. Can't wait a couple more months to smoke that one, and that one.
Well, how many people would you need to do that many plants? Because for them to all get equal attention, you'd need a lot of people.
Yeah, but
that's a lot of jobs, actually.
Right. But in the same sense, if it all started from a point, and so if everything was grown to like be manipulated to grow a certain way, you don't really have to tend to it as much as like, some outdoor grows, they plant it and it just grows and they just tend to it, once in a while, and then they'll pull it through some strings or they'll pull it through some holes and like a big netting and shit like that. And it gets like, 8 feet tall and 8 feet wide, but that's a lot of energy it needs. That needs like full around sun and shit like that. But it's also going to take 5-6 months longer than these guys that are only using like 3 or 4 weeks, and then they're flipping the lights just because they want that shit to start budding. They want to have so many plants. They want it to grow a certain way to only have 3 or 4 colas that they got to trim instead of like 50 buds on one plant that they got to trim. So, a cola looks like a piece of corn. Trimming a piece of corn versus trimming a bunch of popcorn, is a huge difference. So, if you have 100 plants that are grown like pieces of corn, it's going to, make your day fly a lot more than if you got hundreds of plants that have thousands of pieces of popcorn that you're like, holy shit. Okay, let's get to trimming, let's get to processing and shit like that. So,
well, which one would I guess like drawing a blank here. Fuck. See, this is what happens when you get high. Damn it.
Which one would be like better? For,
yeah, sorry.
So no.
That's an obvious question.
Yeah, but it changes. So it's like if you wanted personal production and shit like that, it would be better to do like that one plant and stretch it out to get the most out of it versus having like 10 plants, just because putting the time into that one plant is going to be easier than watering this and watering that and watering this and watering that. Watering one thing and taking care of it, it's almost like having 10 dogs. Yeah. It's like you got to put all those bowls out versus putting one bowl out with one bowl of water. It's easy to see, all right, he ate his food. Versus if you had 10 dogs, you're like, oh, who ate this food?
Yeah, you don't even know who ate what.
Right,
unless
you might have
them.
one thing starving of light. You might have one thing starving of nutrients, that you're just not paying attention to because there's other things going on. So, like, if it was a personal thing, growing one plant is, like, the best way to start just because you can give it its full attention. You can really kind of manipulate it however you want. And then, round 2, round 3, round 4, change it up, so... There were times I was putting shit through nets. There were times where I was putting shit just like raising it above the water and not having it sit in a little pot to where I water it and then it sits in the water and then it drinks the water. There were times where I raised it up and I didn't have it in the water. And then, seeing the different root base and shit like that. So learning from just trying different shit was the best thing you can do, starting easy with like one plant. Because if I was doing that shit with like 10 different plants, I would have just never learned anything.
Well, and I'm assuming that you got these strategies that you tried from the internet too, right?
Yeah,
like you just looked it up. There was different strategies. You're like, all right, I'll try this. I'll try a little bit of this one, a little bit of that one.
But I also learned from how often they failed and succeeded. And I read so many grow journals to where it was like, holy fuck, it's very similar, but he could have set up 4 plants versus 4, one way and 4 the other way, and having 8 plants. Everybody's grow can be different just because of like lighting, room color. If you got yellow walls, it's taking in the color versus white walls, which is reflecting the color. So just looking on the internet could be so different than your situation. You just have to like look at the internet and see what they're doing, how long they've been doing it, what strategies they're using, but not exactly like replicate it into your situation.
Yeah, understanding like their intention with what they were trying to do, based on the equipment they had or whatever their situation was.
Totally.
Okay, that's crazy. There's so much that goes into this shit.
Right, and I mean it's just the beginning of it. So it's like that's why, I'm so grateful to be where I'm at. With a company that grows and being able to see inside and just knowing that this is a starting point, and just seeing what the future holds with what California and Colorado and everybody else is representing for. So, we're a little bit restricted in Illinois just because there's not so many times where you can come and take a visit, at a cultivation center just because you got an Instagram following. In California, there's people that literally wear their T-shirts and jeans and they're walking through the facility, just like touching everything. And in Illinois, it's like cross-contamination. You can't touch this, you can't touch that. You got to wear this suit, you got to wear that. It's very, very particular.
Dang, that's crazy.
Yeah.
I wonder why that is.
I have no idea. I think it's just like, since it's a medical program, it has to be portrayed 100% as medicine. So it has to be sterile and everything has to kind of be very procedured.
And you know what? For medical, I'm okay with that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I think that's good that it has that restriction. I think for recreational, I still want, obviously, like I want it to be made well, and I want to avoid poisons and other things that are put in the plants. So I do want some regulation there, but I also want it to not be as strict for the recreational stuff,
and especially not looked down upon so much. Just because it's like even if it was just a recreational thing, you're still gonna have people that have that stigma, to where it's like they see somebody smoking pot and it's like, oh, I'm about to get robbed. Oh my God, this is scary. I smell cannabis. There must be some kind of like delinquents around here. Instead of like, thinking that it's a medicine and, your grandma could be using cannabis. It's such an easy thing. It needs to be available like liquor's available and shit like that. In stores, you can literally, there's times where I just don't even get ID'd. Yet in Illinois, you got to go through a background check and everything to get your medical card. Yeah, and it's a lot, and it sucks because there's a lot of people that aren't capable of doing it or they don't know about it, and it's a big program that can give you an opportunity to get off opiates, to just have a different view of life. There's a lot of people that are depressed, and it's like they don't want to go through the process of getting a medical card because it's a background check, and it's a $300 payment at the doctor, and then it's a payment for the application fee and fingerprints and all this shit. So it's like, to get a card, you almost have to like catch it at the right time, or go to the right Instagram page to find the right dispensary that's having a get a card event. And I know they're out there. I know Mocha definitely has a fingerprint and get a card event like once a month. So it's like, if there's anybody that needs to get a card, just look up your dispensary, because having a card really, really saves a lot of time, especially trying to find a drug dealer, or, if you get pulled over.
Somebody who may or may not be trustworthy.
Right. And also, like, your medicine is quality medicine, grown correctly.
You can get a particular strain that has the desired effects you're looking for.
Right.
Whereas on the street,
researched.
good luck.
Yeah. And I mean, on the street, you can have a guy that's telling you it's OG Kush, and it's not at all.
Yeah.
There's a million strains out there, so it's like, how the fuck does he know that it's OG Kush? Was he around the guy that grew the shit? It's like, did he watch it come from a facility? Like,
no, probably not.
Right. And if you go to a facility, I would love to see somebody find some OG Kush nowadays. It's like, the way strains are made and crossed and created now, there's nothing that's an original OG Kush anymore. Everything is crossed over. Everything is made into a hybrid, and technically everything kind of is a hybrid, unless it's like it's original pheno made from a pollinated plant made into a new seed pod.
And how do you know?
So, in growing, there will be a mother plant. Mm-hmm. And a mother plant is pretty much like the biggest plant. You could take cuts and stuff like that. So there's a lot of time people will grow a mother plant, take cuts, have the cuts root, and then from that cut, they'll pollinate it young. So then that pollinated plant will be pollinated with pollen from whatever plant they got that seed from. So then whatever pollen they put on that plant will be the cross seed that plant creates.
Okay.
So it's like, say you have lemon diesel growing, and you take OG Kush and you pollinate lemon diesel, then that seed that comes out of that lemon diesel will be that cross of both of those, because it pretty much just had sex. So it's creating that baby seed. How do you know
what you're getting is like purely that strain, though? Like,
it all comes down to genetics. So it's like, if you go to a seed bank, that's your best bet, because a lot of those...
That's like tracked,
right,
and they know where it's coming from.
And a plant's usually going to produce like 100 to 200 seeds. And knowing they're feminized is a really weird process. There's like air chambers and shit like that blow different, and it can't even, it could be correct, but it's possible that you can also have a bunk seed in your feminized seed pack. You know what I mean? So a female seed is what's going to give you buds. A male seed is going to grow something that will create more seeds. So it's like...
And hemp.
Yeah, and hemp, and good stalks and shit like that.
Hell yeah.
So...
Dude, it's amazing what the plant can do, honestly. Like, that's the part that I guess just blows my mind, and it's a shame that it's still illegal in so many places, because it's more than just this part, which we've been talking about, and that in and of itself is its own like benefits, and there's also some cautions. But then with like hemp and that's ability to replace a lot of things like plastics, for example.
Concrete.
Yeah, concrete, and then the single-use plastics, we can have them biodegradable by making them hemp plastic.
Right.
And it's just as effective, and it'll be fine.
Right.
And then it'll also biodegrade and not add to the collective garbage in the ocean that we have.
But again, you got that propaganda bullshit, all those people that consider hemp, even in the cannabis sense, it's like, oh man, a bunch of hippies. Mm-hmm. It's like, okay, all right, whatever, well.
But how about just not arresting people?
Right.
And ruining lives.
Right. I mean, hemp is a whole nother story. It's like, I don't understand why it's such a viable source, and it's so easy to grow. It's a weed. So that thing you can pretty much have grow anywhere. It doesn't need the best lighting. It doesn't need the best nutrients and shit like that. Like, you can grow hemp with water and soil and just, and you could have stalks. but growing the actual like CBD hemp flowers and stuff like that is kind of the same as growing cannabis.
Okay, so if you're trying to grow that, then you have to put in just as much work in terms of the lighting, the nutrients, the cycles.
Right.
Okay.
It's not going to be as like precious looking just because it doesn't it creates kind of the same structure and kind of the same body.
We get it. It's a man. It doesn't compare to a woman.
No. The hemp flowers are still female flowers.
Yeah.
But when it produces seeds, it's a for sure male. More hemp. You know what I mean? So like the industrial hemp is what it would be kind of considered.
Industrial hemp.
Yeah, because those are like 6 feet tall, and everything is kind of like brother and sister. It's not exactly the same. Like cannabis has its own cannabis, and then there's cannabis hemp, and then there's pretty much like CBD cannabis, but it's not exactly like THC.
Damn, dude, I feel like I didn't even know all this stuff. Especially because like I'm a pretty big stoner, like in general. Like I know I've smoked a lot of weed, but I feel like I didn't know that much about the creation process. I just knew I enjoyed it, and I learned ways for me to consume it.
Right, and that's why I wanted to figure that out. I wanted to be the above, I wanted to go above and beyond. Like it satisfied my brain learning about those things and seeing the different progress of the plant and stuff like that. So, I think that's why it made me crave the industry more. Once it came to Illinois, I was like, I'm gonna get in that shit either way. And when I was a bud tender, it was probably like some of the best time I had, because if I couldn't answer a question, I would fucking do whatever I could to get that answer, and then find that patient back, here's your answer, or at least try to do everything I could to have that answer by the start of my day. Just to expect everything. I wanted to answer every question. If this person had cancer, if this person had leukemia, if this person had seizures, I wanted to be not exactly a doctor, but someone who was as available as that, but really had passion for their needs, not just like, hey, we got a discounted $20 flower, you should grab that one. It's like, I want to hear why you want to use this. I want to hear what you're using it for. Daytime, nighttime, energy, relaxing, you got pain, it's like, so just really learning those patients really made me strive to be better in the cannabis industry, to be like, yo, this needs to be something cool, and it needs to be like more available. Like I don't want to talk about my job at like a high school reunion and everybody be like, oh my God, that's so cool. Like I heard it's like the newest thing. It's like, yeah, about that. Like it is awesome. It is cool. I love getting high, and mine's more recreational than anything. Mm-hmm. But it needs to be looked at in both senses. It needs to be the cool thing to do, just like liquor, but it needs to be also like looked at as just a normal fucking thing. Mm-hmm. It's that simple. It's a normal thing. It could also be a sacred thing for some people. Like really is ritualistic, and totally
they're doing some deep spiritual work with it. I'm a huge favor of any sort of plant medicine, like however people want to use it, as long as they're just taking the right precautions and they know themselves well enough to know whether it's serving them. Right. Because there is a point where it's like weed cannot serve you, Yeah. I mean, you kind of green out is what they call it. Mm-hmm. To where it's like you kind of either fall asleep or you throw up, or, you just don't feel it. It's just kind of like you just hit a point to where you've maxed out, you're getting high, but you're not changing moods, you're not changing any type of like reality. It's just, oh man, I'm just ready for bed. And then once your brain goes back to just waking up, hey, have at it. Go green out again. But greening out is kind of just like one of those feelings where it's like, man, am I smoking too much weed? Do I gotta chill out a little bit? Sometimes you gotta just take that week break or a 2-day break. Usually it's me for a couple of hours. I'm like, I gotta take a break. I gotta just chill out. I've been smoking a lot. And then I'll appreciate getting high again, because that's the one thing I always gotta look back at, is just appreciating getting medicated. Yeah, you gotta make sure that you still enjoy it for what it is, and that it's not just like out of habit. Right. Like where you're just doing it unconsciously. Yeah. You're just like, oh, time to smoke. Right. Yeah. I mean, that's why I like packing bowls, because you will smoke it all the way until it's ashes, and then you'll want to take another hit, and you're like, oh, it's cashed. Okay.
All right, I'm done.
Yeah, you're like, you know what? I don't need any more.
It sounds good. Sounds good to me. We're done.
Hell yeah, dude. All right, man. Well, that's been a good one, man. We've gone for a good amount of time here.
Oh, dude,
so
I appreciate it. It's
hell
been
yeah,
hella fun.
Hell yeah. Medicated Markets on Instagram, guys. Follow him. And yeah, that was really fascinating. I really enjoyed learning about weed, man.
Cool. I'm glad to share what I know. You know, it's taken a lot to get in my head, you know, and it's a lot of success and fails and learning. So I would definitely recommend a lot of people really look into not just the index of cannabis and what it is. Everybody knows it's just a bud you smoke, but looking into the profiles and the different CBD, CBG, CBN, THCA, THCV, you know, all the different things that we have in our bodies, endocannabinoid system. So looking into those and finding out more about yourself, but in the same sense, the plant, because we are very similar. And, you know, it's not for everybody, but if you're open to it, definitely give it a try. Smoke a small amount, see how you feel, maybe smoke a little bit more. But just because you buy a joint doesn't mean you got to smoke a joint. You know, you could totally light it and put it out.
It's wise words, man. Please, like, take that precaution. If you haven't really smoked, just smoke a little bit. There's no reason to smoke too much your first time. Right. You don't want to ruin it for yourself.
Yeah, because at that point, you're not going to enjoy what's to come. You're always going to be fearing what that was. You're like, you know, holy shit, you know, I don't want that again. Mm-hmm. It's best to kind of just go with the flow, take a little hit, like, okay, see how it feels in 15 minutes. You know, if you can handle another hit, you know, if you got something on your mind, if you're feeling anxious or some shit, you know, just chill out. You know, it's just cannabis. There's no overdoses. There's no hospital visits. Like, just relax. It will all be groovy in the morning. If you got to go to bed, cold water. You know, all that shit definitely changes how you're feeling. Just remember, it's reality. It's just cannabis. It's just a small effect.
Definitely. All right, guys. We out.